This little gold locket, resting here in the palm of my hand. It doesn't look like much, does it? The chain is delicate, the clasp worn smooth by the thumbs of 3 generations of women in my family. My grandmother, my mother, and then me. I was meant to give it to my own daughter, Amelia, on the day of her engagement dinner. A symbol of our lineage, of the strength passed down. I suppose, in the end, it became a symbol of something else entirely. It became the anchor in the storm I never saw coming, and the cold, hard stone I held in my fist when I decided to become the storm myself. My name is Beatrice Miller. I'm 72 years old, and for 45 of those years, I built a life, not just for myself, but for my only child. My husband, Robert, passed when Amelia was just 10. A good man, a kind man, with hands that could fix anything but the faulty wiring in his own heart. He left us with a mountain of love and a molehill of savings. So I did what I had to do. I took my skill, the one thing my mother had insisted I learn, and I turned it into a business. I'm a couturier, a fancy word for a seamstress, but I made it fancy. From a small room in our house, I built Beatrice Miller Designs into a name whispered with reverence in bridal boutiques across the state. My hands, these hands you see, with their swollen knuckles and pinprick scars, they paid for the private schools, the ballet lessons, the European summer trips, and the Ivy League education that turned my Amelia into a woman I was so fiercely proud of. She met Julian Davenport in her final year of university. He was polished. That's the word for him. Like a brand new shoe, shiny and expensive. But you haven't a clue if it'll be comfortable in the long run. His family was old money, the kind that comes with a family crest and a summer home in the Hamptons. The Davenports didn't make money. They had money. It was just a feature of their existence, like air or gravity. His mother, Margaret, was the gatekeeper of that existence. A woman so tightly wound, she probably squeaked when she walked. From our first meeting, she looked at me as if I were a smudge on her crystal glassware. She appraised my home, my clothes, my profession, with a thin, bloodless smile that never reached her cold blue eyes. I was the quaint, working-class mother, a charming little anecdote for her society friends. But I endured it for Amelia. I saw how her eyes lit up when Julian was around, how she adopted the soft, lilting accent of his social circle, how she held her teacup with her pinky finger extended, just like Margaret. She was happy, and a mother's heart will bear any number of silent indignities for her child's happiness. When Julian proposed, Amelia called me, squealing with a joy so pure it brought tears to my eyes. "We're getting married, Mom. He proposed at the top of the Rockefeller Center." Of course, the first thing I said, after my congratulations, was, "Oh, my love, I will make you the most beautiful wedding dress you have ever seen." It was to be my masterpiece, my magnum opus. I sourced handmade Alençon lace from a convent in Belgium and silk charmeuse that felt like liquid moonlight. For 6 months, my workshop was a sacred space. Every stitch, every bead, every tiny seed pearl was a prayer for her future, a testament to my love. The dress was more than a garment. It was the culmination of my life's work, a final, perfect gift for my daughter. Amelia would come for fittings, but she seemed distracted. She'd be on her phone, texting Julian or scrolling through Instagram. "It's beautiful, Mum," she'd say, her eyes barely glancing at the intricate lacework I'd spent 100 hours creating. She was more concerned with the caterers, the floral arrangements that Margaret had insisted upon, and the ever-expanding guest list filled with Davenports and their associates. I was a footnote in the grand production of her new life, a painful little prick of a needle, but I ignored it. Wedding stress, I told myself. She's just overwhelmed. Then came the matter of the engagement dinner. It was to be the official joining of the families. Margaret was hosting it at the Gilded Quill, a restaurant so exclusive you had to be recommended by a member just to get a reservation. It's on Saturday, the 25th, Amelia had told me a month prior. So on the morning of Friday the 24th, I called her. I had a small gift for her and Julian, a first edition book of poetry by Elizabeth Barrett Browning that Robert had given me on our engagement. I wanted to drop it off. "Hi, honey," I said, my voice bright. "Just calling to confirm for tomorrow. What time should I be at the Gilded Quill? I wouldn't want to be late and embarrass you in front of the Davenports." There was a pause on the other end of the line, a tiny, hollow silence that felt like a crack forming in the foundation of my world. "Oh," Amelia said, her voice unnaturally light, breezy. "The dinner. We had it yesterday." The words didn't compute. It was like she'd spoken in a foreign language. I must have misheard. "Yesterday? But you said it was Saturday." "Did I? Oh, silly me. No, the plans changed. It was all very last minute. Margaret's brother was flying in from London and could only make it on Thursday. It was a whole thing. Honestly, Mum, it was just a stuffy dinner. You wouldn't have enjoyed it." You wouldn't have enjoyed it. The condescension in that phrase was a physical blow. The phone felt slick in my hand. My workshop, moments before a sanctuary of love and creation, suddenly felt like a tomb. The beautiful glowing white dress on the mannequin seemed to mock me. "Oh," I said, my own voice a stranger in my ears. "I see. Well, I hope you had a lovely time." "We did. It was fabulous. Listen, I have to run. Julian's mother is taking me to choose the silverware pattern. I'll call you later." She hung up. I stood there for a long time, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. A last-minute change. A simple mix-up. But a cold dread was seeping into my bones. A certainty that was as sharp and painful as one of my own needles. I sank into my chair, my eyes fixed on the dress. The dress I was pouring my soul into for a girl who couldn't even be bothered to invite me to her engagement dinner. That evening, the lie unraveled with brutal efficiency, courtesy of modern technology. I don't use social media much, but something compelled me to open my laptop and search for Margaret Davenport. Her profile was public, a curated gallery of her perfect life. And there it was. An album posted just hours before, titled, "A Wonderful Evening Welcoming Our Beautiful Amelia into the Davenport Family." There were dozens of photos. Amelia beaming in a chic emerald green dress I'd never seen before. Julian looking smug with his arm around her. The whole Davenport clan toasted with champagne flutes held high. There was Margaret, raising a glass, her arm draped possessively around my daughter's shoulders. The caption under that particular photo read, "Finally, the daughter I've always dreamed of, a perfect match for my perfect son, a family made whole." It wasn't a last-minute change. The floral arrangements were too elaborate. The personalized menus on the tables read, "Celebrating Amelia and Julian, Thursday, October 23rd. It had been planned for weeks. They hadn't forgotten to tell me. They had chosen not to. I wasn't a guest who had been missed. I was a problem that had been solved. I wasn't good enough. My rough, working hands, my story, my very existence didn't fit into the pristine narrative of the Davenport dynasty. And my own daughter, the child I had rocked to sleep and bled for, had allowed it. She had stood there, smiling for the cameras, while her mother sat at home, completely and utterly erased. The pain was a physical entity. It started in my chest, a hot, crushing weight, then spread through my limbs, leaving me cold and trembling. I wept. I wept for Robert, who would have been so horrified. I wept for the little girl Amelia used to be, who thought her mother was the strongest, most wonderful woman in the world. and I wept for the fool I had been, so blinded by my love that I couldn't see the person she had become. The tears lasted through the night. But when the first pale light of dawn crept into my workshop, something had changed. The grief was still there, a hard, cold lump in my gut. But it was no longer a flood. It had frozen over, crystallizing into something sharp, clear, and unyielding. Anger. An anger so pure and so cold it felt like a new spine of steel had been forged inside me. I looked at my hands again. These hands that Margaret Davenport had judged so harshly. These hands had built an empire from thread and sorrow. They had created beauty and provided a life of immense privilege for my daughter. They had power. And I decided, in the quiet solitude of that morning, that it was time to remind everyone of that fact. My revenge would not be loud or messy. It would not be a screaming match or a tearful confrontation. I was a couturier. My work was in the details, in the structure, in the flawless execution of a design. My revenge would be the same, a bespoke creation, tailored to perfection. The first thing I did was call my lawyer, Mr. Henderson, a quiet, meticulous man who had handled my affairs for 20 years. "Good morning, Beatrice," he said. "What can I do for you?" "Good morning, George," I replied, my voice perfectly calm. "I'd like you to begin the process of liquidating the trust fund I set up for Amelia, and I want to transfer the title of her downtown apartment and her car back into my name. The lease on the apartment is up in 2 months. I will not be renewing it." There was a stunned silence. "Beatrice, is everything all right?" "Everything is perfectly clear, George. Just draw up the paperwork." The second call was to a man named Mr. Davies, a private investigator recommended by George years ago for a delicate business matter. "I need you to do a deep financial and historical background check on the Davenport family," I said. "Everything. I want to know where every penny of their old money came from. Spare no expense." The final and most important step in my plan involved the wedding dress. I didn't stop working on it. On the contrary, I redoubled my efforts. I worked with a focus that was almost terrifying. Every stitch was now imbued with a different kind of intent. It was no longer a garment of love, but a gilded cage, a beautiful, perfect trap. I added another 1,000 Swarovski crystals to the bodice. I re-embroidered the hem with platinum thread. I made it into a masterpiece that would take your breath away. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever created. For the next 2 months, I played the part of the doting, slightly befuddled mother. When Amelia called, I was warm and cheerful. I asked about the wedding plans, feigned excitement over the ridiculously expensive silverware she'd chosen. I apologized for having been so sensitive about the dinner. "You were right, honey," I told her, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. It was probably for the best. I would have just been a fish out of water with all of Julian's fancy relatives. Amelia's relief was audible through the phone line. "Oh, good, Mum. I'm so glad you understand." She didn't understand. She didn't understand a thing. They came to my home a month before the wedding, all 3 of them, Amelia, Julian, and the Grand Dame herself, Margaret. They came under the pretense of seeing the finished dress, but I knew the real reason. They needed to discuss the wedding budget. Their lavish plans had exceeded even the Davenports' deep pockets, and they were here, cap in hand, expecting me to sign the checks as I always had. I served them tea in my finest china. I smiled and made pleasant conversation. Margaret was at her condescending best, complimenting my charming little house as if it were a doll's cottage. Finally, Amelia couldn't wait any longer. "Mum, can we see it? The dress?" I led them into my workshop. When I unveiled the mannequin, there was a collective gasp. The dress was magnificent. It shimmered and glowed under the lights, a creation worthy of a queen. Amelia's eyes filled with genuine tears. "Oh, Mum," she whispered, her hands fluttering to her chest. "It's perfect. It's the most beautiful dress in the world." "I'm glad you like it," I said, my voice soft. We returned to the living room. Julian, emboldened by the beauty of the dress and my seemingly placid demeanor, cleared his throat. "Beatrice," he began, calling me by my first name as he always did, as if we were peers. "We did want to discuss one final matter. The wedding planner has drawn up the final budget." He slid a leather-bound folder across the coffee table. I didn't open it. "It's a bit more than we anticipated," Margaret added with a tight smile. "The pavilion at the country club required some structural enhancements for the floral installations." I let the silence hang in the air for a moment before I spoke. "There seems to be a misunderstanding," I said, my eyes meeting Margaret's. The shift in my tone was subtle, but it was enough. The smiles on their faces faltered. "The dress," I continued, gesturing back towards the workshop, "is my gift to Amelia. It is yours to take today." I paused. "However, as for the wedding expenses, my financial contributions have come to an end." Amelia laughed nervously. "Mum, what are you talking about? You always—" "What I always did, Amelia, is over." I picked up a file from the side table. "This is the paperwork confirming the dissolution of your trust fund. The money has been redirected. These are the documents for your apartment. The lease expires on the 30th of next month. You'll need to find a new place to live, and the car is being picked up tomorrow." Amelia's face went white. Julian looked as if he'd been slapped. "What is the meaning of this?" Margaret snapped, her voice like cracking ice. "Are you trying to blackmail us?" "Blackmail is such an ugly word, Margaret," I said calmly. "I prefer to think of it as a rebalancing of the scales." I slid a second, much thicker folder across the table towards her. "This, on the other hand, might be of more interest to you." Her perfectly manicured hand hesitated before opening it. Inside were the findings from Mr. Davies, the private investigator. Pages and pages of documents, photocopied deeds, old newspaper clippings, and sworn affidavits. "You see," I explained, my voice as even as a seam, "I was curious about this old money of yours. It turns out it's not as old as you'd like people to believe. In fact, the Davenport family fortune was founded by your father, Arthur Penhaligon." Margaret's face had turned to stone. A man who, in the 1950s, made his fortune as a notorious slumlord in the industrial district. But the seed money, the capital he used to start his little empire, was swindled from his business partner. A man he cheated, ruined, and left with nothing. A man who died a few years later of a broken heart and pneumonia because he couldn't afford a doctor. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto hers. The man's name was Michael O'Connell, my grandfather. The room was utterly silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the thick Persian rug. Amelia was staring at me, her mouth agape, a look of dawning horror on her face. Julian was just blinking, a confused puppet whose strings had been cut. But Margaret, the mask of civility had shattered, revealing the ugly, desperate woman beneath. "It's a lie," she hissed. "Is it?" I countered. "Mr. Davies found your father's original ledgers, tucked away in a county archive. It's all there in black and white. The stolen funds, the forged signatures, the truth." I stood up. "So here is my proposal. You will take 1/3 of your current net worth, the portion that, by my calculation, was built upon my family's stolen legacy, and you will place it into a charitable foundation. The O'Connell Foundation, we'll call it. It will provide housing and educational grants for underprivileged families in the very district your father once exploited. You will do this publicly, framing it as an act of philanthropic atonement for your family's past predatory business practices." Your reputation will take a hit, but you'll survive. You'll be praised for your honesty. In return for this, I will remain silent. The full, sordid details will stay between us. I looked at my daughter, whose face was streaked with tears. And Amelia, you can still have the dress. It was the ultimate test, her chance to see the truth, to choose family, to choose honor over a life built on a lie. It was Margaret who recovered first. She stood up, her body trembling with rage. You are a vile, manipulative old woman. I am the product of my history, I replied, a history you tried to erase. She turned to Amelia. Are you going to let her speak to me this way? To your future family? Amelia looked from Margaret's furious face to my calm one. I saw the calculation in her eyes, the weighing of options. On one side was her mother, the truth, and a life of reduced circumstances. On the other was the Davenport name, the illusion of wealth, and a future she desperately craved. She made her choice. How could you do this to us, Mom? She sobbed, her words aimed at me like daggers. You're ruining everything. Everything I've worked for. Everything I've worked for. The irony was so bitter it almost made me laugh. I had worked for it. I had paid for it. She had simply received it. My offer stands, I said quietly. Choose. They left. They didn't take the dress. They chose the lie. They stormed out of my house, confident they could weather the storm, that they could call my bluff. They thought I was just a bitter old seamstress. They forgot I was also a brilliant businesswoman who knew how to close a deal. I didn't leak the story to the tabloids. That was never my style. It's too messy, too unpredictable. I am precise. I sent a neatly compiled, fully documented copy of Mr. Davies's report to two people: the chairman of the board of the Davenport Industries Pension Fund and a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist at the Wall Street Journal who specialized in corporate malfeasance. I included a simple, anonymous cover letter. You might find this of interest. The fallout was not a storm, it was a nuclear winter. The journalist broke the story. It wasn't just about a swindle from 70 years ago. It was about the foundation of lies upon which the entire Davenport empire was built. The SEC launched an investigation. Stocks plummeted. The board of directors forced Julian and his father to resign in disgrace. The country club cancelled the wedding reservation, citing a violation of their moral turpitude clause. The Davenports weren't just knocked off their pedestal. The pedestal was ground into dust. Their old money reputation was revealed as nothing more than new money with a good publicist and a dark, dirty secret. The final karmic blow came about 2 weeks later. Margaret, in a desperate attempt to save face, gave a single interview. She threw Amelia under the bus completely, claiming she was a social climber who had been aware of Beatrice's extortion plot all along. The engagement was officially and very publicly called off. Amelia was left with absolutely nothing. No fiancé, no trust fund, no apartment, no car, and no name to hide behind. 3 months after she had stormed out of my house, my doorbell rang. There she was on my doorstep, looking thin and tired, wearing clothes I didn't recognize. Her eyes were red-rimmed and hollow. The polished Ivy League veneer had been stripped away, leaving behind a lost, broken girl. "Mum," she whispered, the word choked with a sob. I didn't rush to embrace her. I didn't cry. The woman who had wept through the night over a missed dinner was gone. I simply looked at her. "I have nothing," she said. "They cut me off completely. I'm staying on a friend's couch. I was wrong. I was so stupid. Please, Mum. I'm so sorry." The apology was there, but the years of sacrifice and the sting of betrayal couldn't be erased by a single desperate word. Forgiveness is not a switch you can flip. "I will not let you be homeless, Amelia," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I am your mother, but we can never go back to the way things were. The trust you broke cannot be mended. I made her an offer, a final one. I would give her a one-time cashier's check for $50,000, enough to get a small apartment, find a job, and start a new life on her own, somewhere else. Or she could have a job at my company, starting at the bottom, unpacking bolts of fabric in the stockroom, sweeping the floors, just like I did when I started. She would earn a fair wage, but she would earn it. She would have a roof over her head, but she would have to learn the value of a day's work, the very thing she and the Davenports had looked down upon. She chose the job. It's been a year now. She's still in the stockroom. She's quiet, and she works hard. Some days, I see a flicker of the little girl I once knew. Most days, I see a stranger who shares my DNA. We are polite. We are civil. But the warmth, the effortless love that once existed between us, it is gone. Perhaps it will return in time. Perhaps not. Some fabrics, once torn, can never be perfectly rewoven. And the dress? The beautiful, magnificent dress that was the cause of it all. I couldn't bear to look at it. So I donated it to a charity that provides wedding gowns for military brides who can't afford their own. I received a letter a few months ago from a young woman, a Marine sergeant, who wore it to marry her childhood sweetheart before his deployment. She sent a picture. She looked radiant, her smile wide and genuine, her joy untainted by lies or social ambition. She looked more beautiful in it than Amelia ever would have. I still hold this locket. I never gave it to her. It sits on my nightstand, a reminder of what was lost, but also of what was found. I lost a daughter in a way, but I found myself again. I remembered that I am not just a mother. I am Beatrice Miller, and my legacy is not one of social standing or inherited wealth. It is etched in every stitch I've ever sewn, built on the strength of my own two hands. It's a legacy of truth, of resilience, and of a quiet, unyielding dignity that no amount of money can ever buy, and certainly no one can ever take it away from me again.